Okay, so in this video, I want to talk about polygons on the coordinate plane. Um, Specifically, this question here, when we look at this polygon over here. The rancher needs to replace the fence for the holding pen for the horses. How much fencing does he need? So you're replacing a fence. That means you're doing like perimeter over here. So I'm like, okay, how's the distance around? That's great. I can just like count these squares. Except if I actually look at these coordinates, they're not just easy whole numbers. You have things like 0.25. Now I got like negatives. Like, okay. All right. So let's kind of work through what we need to do here. We have got to work through each side. And so first there's 8 sides to determine. And since like counting them is going to be challenging, what we want to do is kind of go through and look at these coordinates. So when we go to A to H, right? So this line here, A to H, we can see that our y coordinates are the same, 4.5. And so we look at the x coordinates are the same, 4.5. So we look at the y, positive 14 and negative 2 and 2500. So when they have different signs, we add the absolute values. So we do 14 absolute value plus negative 2.25 absolute value. So that becomes 2 and 25 hundredths plus 14 plus 2 and 25 hundredths. So we end up with 16.25. And so we could record that one right over here, 16.25. And we want to continue to work all the way around here. So we go up here to AB, and we have a y coordinate. So in this one, your x coordinates are different, your y coordinates are the same. But in this case, we have two positives. So in that case, we have two of the same sign. So in that case, we subtract their absolute value. So we do 15 minus 4.5, or the absolute value of 15, which is 15, and the absolute value of 4.5, which is 4.5. So 15 minus 4 and 5 tenths. We can annex a 0 here. We regroup. And this becomes 5 tenths. You bring your decimal. 4 minus 4 is 0. And then the 1. So it's 10 and a half. And a half. Now we can use some mathematical knowledge. Like you can tell that because B and G and A and H are the same, like here, it's kind of like a rectangle, so we can know that this side is 10 and a half too. You could go ahead and let's see, you'd have to do 15 and 4. So it'd be the same thing. You'd be doing 15 minus 4 and a half, and so it'd be 10.5. Now over here, this whole length is going to be 16 and 25 hundredths. We know that, but there's obviously some space here, so we know that we'd have to add this and this and this to get 16 and 25 hundredths. And that would equal that. But what we have to figure out still is this. So we could do 10 and a half plus 10 and a half plus 16 and 25 hundredths, but we don't know these two, and they should end up being the same. So we got to come through here. We got to do, all right. So 10, 8, 10, comma 8, 15, comma 8. So the 8s are the same. So we end up doing the difference between the absolute values of the 10 and the 15, which is 5. 15 minus 10 is 5. So this becomes 5, and this becomes 5. So we've kind of figured this out. We don't need to worry about what this is specifically because we're just looking at the number of yards of fencing, right? And since it's not clearly labeled, we would assume these are all yards. So we do 16 and 25 hundredths, and we just add that to itself. So 16.25 plus 16.25. I know 25 and 25 cents is going to be 50 cents. And 16 plus 16 is 32, right? We can add 5 and 5, which would be 10 more, which puts it up to 42.50. And then we got to add the 10.5. We add that twice. If you actually go ahead and add that up ahead of time, you get rid of this decimal here. Plus So 5/10 and 5/10 is going to be a whole whole. And then you end up with 1, and you get 21.0. So the addition here is not too bad. End up with a half here. You can just leave that 0 alone. 2 plus 1 is 3, and 4 plus 2 is 6. It should be 63.5. So the rancher needs 63.5 yards of fencing. And that's kind of how you can use polygons in the coordinate plane, and then this formula of absolute values to figure out like a perimeter or something.